Hello and welcome to this video where the subject is resolution and image size, specifically reducing resolution for a number of different reasons. We know that most modern cameras will capture great higher resolution images, but there are a number of reasons why we may want our images at a much lower resolution, and it doesn't really matter where we begin this process from, be that a 10 megapixel camera or a 30 megapixel camera. We can't attach a 60 megapixel picture to an email, and we cannot post the same size picture on a website. If we were making a slideshow, we definitely have no need for all the pixels in a 60 megapixel picture. When we're asked to submit images to a camera club competition, the Camera Club will not wish you to provide a file size of 60 megabyte either. Now the good news is that for viewing an image on screen, a resolution of let's say 1920 pixels by 1080 is going to meet all of our visual needs for image quality, vibrance and sharpness. In the previous video we looked at the two images I currently have open on screen, although we're only seeing the lower res one at the moment. One is very high resolution at 48 megabyte, and this one is low resolution at 4 megabyte. But as we switch from one to the other, here we're looking at the high res, the low res, back to the high res, you can see visually there's little or no difference between them. The lower resolution image works for us here because it's only going to be viewed at the size it was created. We're not going to zoom into this image as we would perhaps with a high resolution version. Let's take the image I have on screen and reduce the resolution, assuming it's for a Camera Club competition. Camera Club rules will often say, create your image no wider than 1920 pixels and no higher than 1080. The rules don't mean the image has to be those exact sizes, they are the upper limit. Having said that, there will be times when your image will fit those dimensions perfectly, but that's a personal choice. To begin this process, let's open up the image size window. We're going to need it to reduce the resolution, but it's going to be useful to be able to see the size of the image before we start. We can bring this on screen with shortcut keys, Control Alt I, but I think most people would go to the image menu and choose image size. If we start at the top of the image size window, we can see the image size is 60 megabyte, quite a large file. And we can see that that's made up with an image of 5616 pixels by 3744. We can also see that it's 18 or almost 19 inches by 12 with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. We also see we have a little box called the Resample box. We're going to need to downsize this image by actually removing pixels, but in this case it's the right thing to do. Now I think I'm correct in saying that by default this box will be ticked most of the time, but just in case yours isn't, make sure it is, because you're going to need it to remove pixels from the image. In later versions of Photoshop, you've got a little drop down window alongside. We can either leave this set to automatic and allow Photoshop to make its own decisions which I have to say I don't have any quarrel with. But if I open it up, you can see there's a few options for enlarging images, and there's one here for reducing them, bicubic, sharper, when we're reducing images. So let's select that. If I go to the option here, I can see my image shown in percentage terms, pixel, inches and many others. What we need is pixels. soon as I do that, we get this value here repeated in those two boxes, and of course it's this value that we can change. Now before I make that change, can I just remind you that the image we're working on here is one that's never been cropped. It's from a Canon digital SLR, so we know the aspect ratio is 3:2. Now camera clubs may be asking you to provide an image up to 1920 pixels and up to 1080 in height. If you were to adopt both of those, the aspect ratio would change to 16:9. Here that's not appropriate because we do not have a 16:9 image. So look what happens when I take the width first, given that it's at the top of the list. If I highlight that and I overtype that with my 1920, what you'll notice is the height automatically changes to 1280 because the width and the height are locked together. If they weren't locked together, then of course we would badly distort the image. We would only change the width and not the height. But if we remember the club rules say we can produce an image up to 1920 pixels on the width and up to 1080 in height. Here we've got a little bit of a problem. We cannot gain 1920 in width and 1080 in height. But the solution is pretty simple. We choose the height over the width. So if I highlight 1280 and I put my 1080 pixels into that box, the maximum width I can get while retaining the 3:2 aspect ratio is 1620. When I click OK, the image will jump to a smaller size. But we shouldn't be surprised at that because that's exactly what we've done. Let me go to the toolbox, pick up my zoom tool, because the first thing we need to do is to look at this at 100% because that's the size it's going to be viewed in the Camera Club competition, probably by the judge and certainly on club night in front of all your colleagues. So if we look at it at 100% and the picture looks pretty good, we can submit this with a degree of confidence. We can quite clearly see that the quality of our image is good. I will just bring this down a little bit to fit the image on screen. But let me bring up that image size window again. I'll use Ctrl-Alt-I this time. It's quite a convenient shortcut, but you'll remember that the original was 60 megabyte in size. This one is now 5 megabyte, but of course if we save this as a JPEG and maybe compress it to something like level 8, it will be far smaller than that. But what we have there is an image with a reduced resolution. It meets all the rules of the Camera Club and we're ready to submit it. Now I said a few moments ago that your Camera Club's rules may state that you can create an image up to 1920 pixels by 1080. And I also said that there are times when we can actually use the entire width and the height. So we can actually reduce the resolution and crop the image in one go. Let me show you how we can do that with this image. But first, let me just bring up that image size window so you can see that we're beginning this with an image which is 75 megabyte in size and over 6000 pixels on the long side. So we're going to be reducing this considerably. I'll cancel that because I want to select my crop tool. I'm going to select it from the toolbox on the left hand side. But up at the top I need to make one or two changes. From this drop down window I want to make sure I've got width and height resolution, and in this box I want to put my 1920, and I must remember to put px in there so that I'm telling Photoshop not only that I want you to make it 1920, but I'm telling it that I want it to measure in pixels, otherwise it could very well select inches perhaps. In the next box we'll put our 1080 pixels, and you can see exactly what happens to the crop. I'm going to lose a little bit off the top, I'm going to lose a little bit off the bottom, but of course I can move the crop around and choose to take the image from the bottom or the top, but I think the position it chose around there is about perfect. Look where the line is there, that strong compositional line, it's right on the horizon. So in this particular instance I could decide to hit the tick. Once again the image will become small. I'll pick up my zoom tool once again and we'll look at this at 100%, and hopefully you'll agree we've not lost any detail there either, or quality. But then I'll just drop it back to fit on screen. Then I'll bring up that image size menu once again, or the window, and we can see it's done almost the same as what we did before. It's taken that colossal image and brought it down to just under 6 megabyte in size, but of course we've got the perfect size for the Camera Club competition, and we've even improved the composition at the same time. Not all camera clubs will be asking for file sizes up to 1920 pixels on the long side and 1080 pixels in height. Some may require something a little less. So I'm going to bring up the image size window for this image, and as you can see, again it's a high resolution image, 6000 pixels on the long side, but we have the resample box ticked. We've got the bicubic sharper for reducing the resolution, and let's just assume here that your Camera Club says that you can have a file size no greater than 1366 by 768. Well, we've got exactly the same issue. If I put 1366 there, then we're slightly greater than the 768. So once again, we would just switch to the height. We would make that the 768 because the maximum we can get in the width in pixels is 1291 to retain the aspect ratio we currently have. Once again, the image drops down to a small size, but when we look at it much bigger, quality remains and we can submit the image. Now, can I ask you if you've enjoyed this video? Of course you have. You've stayed right to the end. And if you have, don't forget to check out our Photoshop for photographers.